Feel your ears hang low.
The entire outer ear is called the pinna. The physiology of the pinna is to help localize high-frequency sounds that are in the 3,000 hertz range. This is the helix that curves around into the crus of the helix, and this is the antihelix that splits into a fork of the crura of the antihelix that forms the fossa triangularis. Up in here is the scaphoid fossa. Up in this area is the cymba concha, and down in here is the cavum concha. This is the earlobe. This right here is the antitragus, and this area right in here is the intertragal notch. This covering is cut away, but this is where the tragus would be, and it is covering the external auditory meatus. The first 1/3 portion of the EAM is cartilaginous, and the last 2/3 of it is the bony portion. The 2/3 bony part of the EAM is the tympanic portion of the temporal bone. This is made up of the mastoid air cells that encases the medial 2/3 of the EAM as well as the middle ear.
The physiology of the ear canal is to regulate temperatures to make sure that the air is warm at the point that it reaches the tympanic membrane. Cerumen is produced in the outer 1/3 or cartilaginous portion of the EAM. The purpose of cerumen is to protect the ear as well as a natural cleaning process. Cerumen migrates out of the ear through jaw movement and gland secretions. This is the tympanic membrane. It's the border between the outer ear and the middle ear. The tympanic membrane is made up of 3 layers. The lateral layer is an epithelial layer, which is continuous from the EAM. The central layer is a fibrous portion made up of connective tissue, which supports and strengthens the tympanic membrane. The medial layer is a mucous membrane that's continuous with the middle ear cavity.
This is the umbo, which is the most concave portion of the tympanic membrane. It extends up into the manubrium of the malleus. This is the lateral process of the malleus, and then up above it is the pars flaccida. Right below the pars flaccida is the chorda tympani nerve, and then right below that is the long process of the incus. The entire area over here is the pars tensa, and then this is the fibrous annulus, which connects the tympanic membrane to the ear canal.
The physiology of the tympanic membrane is that it aids in improving sound transmission to the inner ear, which means it turns acoustical energy into mechanical energy. This is the malleus. It is one of the 3 bones in the middle ear. First, we have the head of the malleus. Then we have the anterior process of the malleus. And then we have the neck of the malleus, the lateral process, and the manubrium.
This is the incus. It is the central bone of the 3 bones in the middle ear. Up at the top is the head of the incus, and then over the point is the short process, and then right here is the articulation with the malleus. This is the long process of the incus, and then that is the lenticular process.
This is the stapes. First we have the head of the stapes, and then we have the anterior crus and the posterior crus, as well as the footplate. The stapes sits on the oval window of the medial wall of the middle ear. Also on the medial wall, we have the round window, prominence of the facial nerve canal, the prominence of the semicircular canal, the promontory, and the tympanic nerve, which is over the promontory. Next, we have the superior wall, or the ceiling, which is the tegmen tympani. And then on the inferior wall, or the floor, we have the jugular fossa. And next we have the posterior wall. The posterior wall has the tympanic adductus, which is the entrance into the mastoid air cells, the pyramidal eminence, which houses the stapedius muscle, the fossa incutus, which you can't see on the cube, but it houses the short process of the incus, and the chorda tympani nerve, which innervates the tongue. And on the anterior wall, which is directly across from the posterior wall, we have the carotid canal and the canal of the tensor tympani, which houses the tensor tympani muscle, and in between those we have the septum canalis muscula tuberi, which is the division between the two. And then we have the cochlear-form process and the eustachian tube. And then the last wall, which was cut away on the cube, is the lateral wall, which has the tympanic membrane and then the squamous portion of the temporal bone. The middle ear has two muscles that we talked about. The first is the stapedius muscle, which is on the medial wall, and then the other is the tensor tympani, which is on the anterior wall.
There are two levels to the middle ear. There is the epitympanic cavity, which is the top portion, or the attic, and then there is the tympanic cavity, which is down by the tympanic membrane.
Next, we're going to talk about the ligaments of the middle ear. First, we have the anterior ligament of the malleus, and it connects from the malleus to the anterior wall. And then we have the lateral ligament of the malleus, which connects from the neck of the malleus to the bony wall. And then we have the superior ligament of the malleus, which connects from the tegmen tympani to the malleus, and it's in the tympanic recess. And then we have the posterior ligament of the incus, which connects from the short process of the incus to the posterior wall. The annular ligament of the stapes, which connects from the footplate of the stapes to the oval window. And then finally we have the superior ligament of the incus, which isn't in this picture and it's really hard to get a picture of, but it connects from the head of the incus to the superior wall.
This is the eustachian tube, and it removes debris and mucus from your middle ear down into your nasopharynx. It also equalizes pressure from the middle ear to the ambient air pressure around it.
Sound waves enter the EAM, which hits the tympanic membrane. This causes a rocking motion of the ossicles. This lever action causes the footplate of the stapes to push against the oval window. When this happens, the fluid in the inner ear swirls and rotates through the cochlea and pushes out on the round window. The difference in size between the tympanic membrane and the oval window causes a 17:1 pressure change, which is a 25 decibel increase. This is called the impedance matching system.
These are the three basic areas of the inner ear. First is the cochlea and the vestibule, the superior semicircular canal, the posterior semicircular canal, and then the horizontal semicircular canal. This is the cochlea in the inner ear. When it is sitting in this position, it makes 2.5 turns. This is the cochlea unrolled. At the top right here is the scala vestibuli, and it goes around to the helicotrema, which is at the apex or the top of the cochlea, around into the scala tympani. In between the scala tympani and the scala vestibuli is the scala media. The scala media has its own fluid, which is endolymph. The scala tympani and the scala vestibuli share a fluid through the helicotrema, which is perilymph.
This is a cross-section of the cochlea. On top we have the scala vestibuli, and on the bottom we have the scala tympani, both of which are bony canals. In between we have the scala media, which floats in the perilymph of both the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani, and it's held in place by the spiral ligament. On the top of the scala media we have the Reisner's membrane, and on the bottom we have the Basler's membrane, which is held up by the spiral lamina. And then on the inside of the scala media, which is filled with endolymph, we have the organ of Corti. The entire cochlea receives its nutrients from the stria vascularis.
The basilar membrane is tonotopic. When it is taken out of the cochlea and unrolled, the base of the basilar membrane is narrow and stiff, and it receives the high-frequency sounds. When you go up to the apex, it widens out and it is also floppy. This is where the low-frequency sounds are received.
So this is the organ of Corti. It is the end sensory organ for hearing, and it resides on the basilar membrane. First, on the organ of Corti, we have the outer hair cells, which are sensory cells, and they line the basilar membrane, and there's 3 to 5 layers of them, and there's about 12,000 per cochlea. Second, we have the inner hair cells, which are also sensory cells, and they also line the basilar membrane, but there's only 1 row of them, and there's about 3,500 per cochlea. Then we have the Corti's tunnel, or Corti's arch. It's a supporting structure for the inner and outer hair cells. And then we have the tectorial membrane, which is a gelatinous membrane, and it contains the cilia of the hair cells which are embedded in it.
This is a close-up picture of the outer hair cells. Right here is an outer hair cell, and on top of it is the stereocilia of the outer hair cells. The purpose of the outer hair cells are to sharpen the wave of the basilar membrane with their movement, which improves the frequency specificity of the cochlea. The outer hair cell has one nerve fiber that might attach to 10 different outer hair cells. And then the inner hair cells potentially have 20 nerve fibers to only one of the inner hair cells.
This is the medullus. It's the central core of the cochlea. Blood and the cochlear portion of the eighth cranial nerve, which is also the vestibulocochlear nerve, enter throughout the body. The inner hair cell connects to the spiral ganglion, which attaches to the vestibulocochlear nerve, which is housed in the internal auditory meatus. The internal auditory meatus also houses the facial nerve. And now we have the physiology of the inner ear.
The sound wave hits the fluid of the inner ear, causing the perilymph to be displaced. This displacement causes the Reisner membrane to shift, which causes the endolymph to be displaced. The displacement of the endolymph causes the basilar membrane to shift. This movement goes from base to apex. With that motion, the outer hair cells rub on the tectorial membrane and cause the cilia to bend. This movement is called a chemical-mechanical cochlear microphonic release. This release sends information to the auditory nerve.
And this is the vestibular system of the inner ear. The vestibular system of the ear uses gravity, motion, and inertia to stimulate the vestibule system. The vestibular system uses inertia with fluid and membranes to sense where we are in space. Some important landmarks of the vestibular system include the utricle, the saccule, and the semicircular canals. First, we have the horizontal semicircular canal, the anterior semicircular canal, and the posterior semicircular canal. Maculae are end organs for the utriculosaccular system. We have one on both the utricle and on the saccule. Parts of the maculae are in the picture behind me. There's the cilia, and then the hair cells, which are in a membranous portion. And then on top of all of that is the otoconia.
Attached to the semicircular canals are ampullae. Within the ampullae are crista, and those are the end organ for the semicircular canals. Within the semicircular canals, there is an endolymphatic sac. This sac is thought to be a drainage system of endolymph to help keep the fluid balanced within the inner ear. Attached to the endolymphatic sac is an endolymphatic duct, and that attaches the utricle and the saccule. Attaching the saccule to the cochlea is the ductus reunius.
The purpose of the vestibular system is to maintain balance. It acts as a reflex action for the maintenance of equilibrium, and it's important in preservation of a constant field of vision. The vestibular system tells the eyes where to look, and the ocular motor is the eye muscle that tells our eyes where to look.
There are three pathways within the vestibular system. The first one is the vestibulospinal pathway, and that is used for position and posture. The second one is the vestibulocerebellar, and that is the brain communication for balance and stability. The last one is the vestibulo-ocular, and that is for balance and ocular reflux.
The maculae of the utricle and the saccule are part of the linear acceleration system. The saccule is your up and down motion as if you're in an elevator, and your utricle is your back and forward motion as if you're walking or in a car. These both provide information about gravity. The crista are part of the semicircular canals and are responsible for angular movement. Your head and fluids move, and your crista copula is deflected. The superior semicircular canal is your yes and no motion. Your horizontal semicircular canal is your no motion. And your posterior is your I don't know side-to-side motion. When the superior canal of one ear is stimulated, the posterior of the other is inhibited. So your left superior canal works with your right posterior canal and vice versa, and your horizontal canals work together.